In an age of algorithms and outrage, the quiet strategist wins. Power doesn't shout anymore, it arranges the room, writes the rules, and lets everyone else talk themselves into obedience. Tonight, I want you to meet Machiavelli again, not as a villain from old stories, but as an engineer of power psychology whose blueprints fit our world better than ever. 5 centuries ago he watched dukes and diplomats dance through courts made of velvet and knives. Today the court is a feed, the dukes are founders, and the knives are metrics. The stage changed. The mind did not. We still follow the person who offers certainty when we are drowning in noise. We still trade our judgment for a script that promises safety. We still mistake confidence for competence because confidence lowers our fear faster than facts do. That is why his thinking remains dangerous and useful. He didn't celebrate cruelty, he studied behavior the way a doctor studies symptoms, cold, curious, focused on what works when stakes are real. Not evil, empirical. And that is exactly why he offends us, because his clarity pokes holes in the stories we tell about our goodness, our fairness, our noble motives. It is easier to call him dark than to admit how often we crave someone else to steer the ship. Look at your screen for a moment. Speed, scale, signal. That is the holy trinity of modern power. Speed decides who frames the moment first. Scale decides whose frame becomes the default. Signal decides what the crowd repeats when they are too tired to think. Attention is the battleground and the algorithms are the weather. Most of what we call chaos is only wind around a well-placed structure. Machiavelli would tell you to build the structure. Don't wait for the storm to pass, design the harbor so ships must come to you. He would ask, what terms define your life right now, and who wrote them? If you didn't choose the terms, you already surrendered the first move. The psychology is simple and sharp. People crave certainty more than they crave truth. Control reduces anxiety. The person who can reduce the group's anxiety, by telling a clear story, by claiming responsibility, by setting a schedule everyone can follow, becomes the anchor. We say we love freedom, and we do, but when uncertainty rises, we look for a handrail. Most influence is nothing more than offering a better handrail at the right moment. And once you understand that, morality becomes a question of mission and restraint. What are you building with this power, and where will you refuse to go even if you could? Think of this project as a blueprint for a new prince in a world of code and cameras. Strategy, here, is architecture. We will place beams where pressure will come. We will hide the wiring so the lights always turn on. We will design rooms that make certain choices feel obvious and other choices feel exhausting. This is not about being cruel. It is about being precise. The old palace has become a dashboard, the court whisper is now a push notification, the royal procession is a trending topic that looks like fun and functions like a coronation. If you can accept that, you can learn to move quietly and well. Let me map the journey you're about to take. Over 10 chapters will walk from foundations to finesse, how to set the game before it starts, how to master perception without losing yourself, how to use chaos without becoming chaotic, why loyalty is a mirage you can read and harness, how silence shapes rooms, how human weakness becomes a map you must treat with care, how the 21 practical rules of Machiavellian power work in real life, how algorithms reward certain minds, how a modern prince thinks and regulates emotion, and finally, how to outwit everyone without losing your soul. Chapter 7 will be a clear, rapid arsenal, 21 rules you can practice, one at a time, like small hinges that swing heavy doors. We are not chasing drama. We are building reliability under pressure, and a reputation that whispers louder than other people's noise. By the end, you won't just understand power, you'll become hard to replace. That is the quiet goal. Not applause. Not spectacle. Gravity. The kind of presence that makes panic settle, that makes people breathe easier when you walk in, that makes your absence felt more than your speeches. If this work sharpens you, follow, review, and pass it to one person who plays to win. And as you listen, ask yourself a simple question: where in your life are you letting other people write the rules you live by, and what would change if you picked up the pen. Before we go deeper, take a breath and subscribe to Audiobook Vision, tap like, and tell me in the comments what you're most curious to uncover. What follows may challenge your comfort, question your habits, and tilt the frame you use to read power in everyday life. Share this with the one person in your circle who likes difficult questions and honest answers. In a world where algorithms reward speed and noise, we'll choose slowness, precision, and agency, so you can meet the same world with steadier eyes and a sharper mind. Ready? Let's begin. Rule the game before it starts. The first move isn't the opening, it's the board design. Most people rush to make a move because action feels like progress, but strategy begins earlier, in the quiet work of deciding what the game even is. Machiavelli would tell you to scout the map before the march, to study the hills and the weather and the roads that look straight but bend at the last second. Before you speak, choose the terms. Before you enter, choose the timing. Before you compete, choose the terrain. Foresight is not magic, it is pattern plus patience. You look at how things usually break, you notice where people habitually look away, and you arrange your path so their blind spot becomes your corridor. Think about the last time you felt behind, emails pouring in, fires everywhere, pressure to respond now. That pressure is a signal you're already playing on someone else's board. The remedy is not speed, it is redesign. In the modern world, rule writing hides in plain sight. A business doesn't just sell a product, it names a category in a way that makes every rival look like an imitation. A political movement doesn't only gather votes, it fights to sit at the table that sets the voting rules, committees that decide who speaks, when, and for how long. Even in personal life, the friend who frames the conversation decides if we are discussing fairness or gratitude, blame or repair. This is social framing, and it is everywhere. When you define what counts, you quietly define who counts. If the game is framed as speed, the sprinters win. If the game is framed as endurance, the patient win. If the game is framed as elegance, the loudest will look clumsy no matter how hard they shout. You don't have to be the strongest if you can be the one who decides what strength means here. Preparation is often invisible, which is why it is underestimated. It looks like nothing until it looks like inevitability. Close your eyes and picture yourself building a small, simple rulebook for a situation that scares you, a negotiation, a presentation, a relationship talk that keeps getting derailed. Now listen, very low metronomic click begins, then fades under the words, and let that quiet rhythm be the pace of your planning. Define terms so arguments don't slide into mud. Decide timing so you're not dragged into midnight emergencies that could have been morning meetings. Choose terrain so you meet on neutral ground, not in someone's office where they sit higher and you sit lower. When you plan like this, you create a world where good choices are easy and bad choices are heavy. People will call you lucky. They won't see the scaffolding. Let me give you a simple case study without brand names or headlines. Imagine a small company that stops arguing about features and starts defining a new category, something like calm technology, instead of fast technology. They publish a short standard, fewer notifications, quieter screens, predictable updates. They recruit partners to sign the standard, they design their reviews around it, they reward developers who follow it. Suddenly, the conversation in the market bends. Competitors who still brag about speed now look jittery. Media who measure noise now seem out of date. The rules shifted, the scoreboard rewards a different behavior. Nothing illegal. Nothing dramatic. Just a cleaner board where their strengths are native and other people's strengths feel like the wrong metric. This is category design and standard setting at work, the power to pre-select outcomes by predefining value. When you practice this at a human scale, daily life becomes lighter. You set the rule that your deep work happens before noon, and after noon you are generous with meetings. You set the rule that difficult talks begin with a shared definition of the problem and end with a next step you both can do by Friday. You set the rule that your attention is a resource you spend on purpose, not a public fountain anyone can drink from forever. People will adapt because most people prefer clear paths to clever fights. You are not controlling them, you are removing friction and inviting sanity. That invitation is power. Whoever sets the rules wins. It isn't romantic, but it is merciful, because rules protect you from the weather of other people's moods. The discipline is to design early, not out of fear, but out of care for your future self. We are all building rooms we will one day have to live in, and the air in those rooms is made from our choices now, the terms we choose, the tempos we enforce, the thresholds we defend. So here is your gentle challenge for tonight: rewrite one small rule in your life so that your strengths are native to the environment you wake up in tomorrow. Maybe it's the first 15 minutes of your day. Maybe it's the first sentence of your next email. Maybe it's the location of the next high-stakes conversation. Change the board by one square, and watch how many pieces suddenly move in your favor. And ask yourself, with honesty and a little courage, what rule, if you wrote it today, makes your rivals slow and you fast? Perception is power. Reality is stubborn. Perception is scalable. We like to think truth moves people, but most days it is the feeling of truth, the shape of a story, the surface of a face, the promise of safety, that actually wins decisions. Machiavelli understood this long before cameras and comment sections. He knew that appearing good often beats being good, not because virtue is fake, but because virtue is a public interface. The world cannot read your heart, it only reads your signals. If the interface is clumsy, people never get to the code beneath. That is why saints with poor timing look suspicious and average minds with clean framing look brilliant. We are not proud of this, but we are wired this way. We make fast judgments to save mental energy, and then we defend those judgments as if they were sacred. First impressions are not just introductions, they are anchors that make every later fact swim uphill. SFX, subtle camera shutter. Think about the last time you met someone who felt steady in the first 7 seconds. You gave them more room, more patience, more benefit of the doubt. You saw them through the frame they handed you. Machiavellian charisma is not a costume, it is a mask that fits the mission. A mask is not a lie when it expresses the part of you that serves the moment. That means choosing 3 things on purpose: the emotion you transmit first, the role you occupy in a room, and the story you let people tell about you when you are not there. Your first emotion should be calm or conviction, never apology. Your role should be simple: guide, builder, sentinel, so others don't waste energy guessing. And your story must be repeatable in one line, or strangers will invent a worse one for you. SFX, subtle camera shutter. Online, this is even sharper. Feeds flatten nuance. Filters smooth doubt. Captions frame reality like a courtroom where the first attorney to speak defines the case. The same photo reads as humility or hunger depending on 9 words above it. The same clip becomes a confession or a coronation, depending on which sentence you pin. Most people post and pray, strategists edit and stage. They ask, what conclusion am I making fast and easy for a tired mind to reach? Digital deception is not always malicious, often it is simply design. You are designing the path of least resistance toward the truth you want seen. That means triaging your image the way a field medic triages wounds: stop the bleeding first, stabilize the narrative second, then improve the details. Stop the bleeding means remove distractions, loud clothes, messy backdrops, rambling intros. Stabilize the narrative means write the first sentence that tells people who you are and why they should stay. Improve the details means align tone, color, posture, and pacing with that sentence so the brain experiences coherence. When the brain feels coherence, it relaxes. When it relaxes, it agrees. SFX, subtle camera shutter. In practice, keep the first 7 seconds sacred. Look into the lens, breathe once, deliver the headline clean. Avoid qualifiers that weaken the spine of your message. Speak as if you already earned the right to be heard, because hesitation is contagious and so is certainty. There is a quiet ethics to all this. Perception can be weaponized, but it can also be stewardship, making your best self legible so your work can travel farther than your physical presence. If you hide your strength, you force others to waste time rediscovering it. If you broadcast an illusion, you trap yourself inside it. The middle path is clarity. Shape what's true into something visible, and let the surface carry the weight of your substance. To do that, you will have to accept that people rarely read the appendix. They read the cover, the blurb, the first paragraph, and decide. Do not resent this. Respect it. Build for it. Over time, 1,000 accurate first impressions stack into trust, and trust is the only algorithm you actually own. So ask yourself, if they Googled you for 10 seconds, what would they conclude, and who wrote that conclusion? If you do not author your opening, the laziest narrative will do it for you. Tonight, give your future a cleaner doorway. Choose the 2 adjectives you want whispered when you leave the room. Rewrite your bio so a stranger can repeat it without smudging the meaning. Record a greeting that sounds like the person you are on your best day. Then test it. Watch how differently doors open when the first 7 seconds match the next 7 minutes. In the end, perception is not a trick, it is a translation. Make the translation honest and strong, and the world will finally see what you meant them to see all along. Control through chaos. Uncertainty breaks most people. It crowns the prepared. The world shifts, the lights flicker, the plan on paper begins to wobble, and you can feel the room holding its breath. In moments like this, most minds rush to stop the shaking, to grab anything solid, to demand an answer right now. But strategy in chaos is not about stopping the storm, it's about learning the wind and setting your sails while others are still arguing about the weather. Instability looks like danger from far away, and sometimes it is, but up close it's also leverage. Prices move, positions loosen, habits crack open. Power hides in the seams, and turbulence creates seams everywhere. Machiavelli would tell you the paradox is simple: chaos hurts the unprepared and hands tools to the patient. Your work is to become the sort of person who can use a moving floor. Controlled confusion is a discipline, not a tantrum. It means widening the opponent's focus until they can't hold the whole picture in their head. You don't lie, you layer. You show 3 fronts when you plan to pressure 1. You keep conversations active in places that do not matter. Southwest, the place that does matter feels quiet and ordinary. A dazzle attack doesn't blind, it distracts. Think of a chessboard where you advance 2 pawns on opposite sides, trade a few small pieces, and invite attention there, while your real aim is time to castle, time to centralize, time to make the endgame inevitable. That's how chaos becomes cover. Your motions look busy but your meaning stays hidden until the board is ready to tell the story you want told. Unpredictability is not the same as randomness. Randomness is noise, unpredictability is a signal that you refuse to be read. When people cannot predict your next step, they default to caution, and caution is slow. Keeping options open is not fear, it is oxygen. You choose reversible moves when the future is foggy and irreversible moves when the path is clear. You vary your tempo so habits cannot form around you. You cancel a meeting no one expected you to cancel, and you show up early to the meeting they assumed you would avoid. This light touch tells the room, you are not chaotic, but you are not captive either. Underestimation follows, and underestimation is a soft armor that lets you work without constant resistance. Stress is a force you can feel in the body: tight jaw, shallow breath, the narrowing of vision that turns a horizon into a keyhole. In groups, stress behaves the same way: options collapse, tempo spikes, and people grab the first story that makes the fear stop. Decision fatigue lowers standards, and the loudest pitch wins because it is easiest to hear. If you can control tempo, you can control choices. Slowing things down when panic rises returns oxygen to the brain. Speeding things up when others want to stall prevents sabotage disguised as caution. Ask fewer, clearer questions. Offer 2 aligned choices instead of 5 scattered ones. Rest the system for a moment, and you will watch intelligence come back into the room as if someone opened a window. Modern life gives you examples every hour. Media storms reward the first frame, not the truest one, so those who concede the initial story, calmly, quickly, cleanly, own the air while others scramble to correct. Crisis arbitrage works the same way in markets and in reputations. When everyone is fleeing, the prepared look for assets left on the table, alliances no one is calling back, skills suddenly in short supply. You see it in careers when a new technology scares a field, the person who studies while others gossip quietly becomes essential. You see it in relationships when conflict erupts, the person who refuses to escalate and instead reframes the problem earns trust that outlasts the fight. Chaos is not new. Our tools are faster. Our minds are the same. So here is the gentlest way to hold all of this: you do not have to love storms to move well in them. You only have to accept that they come, and build a self that does not collapse when the floor moves. Make small promises to yourself that you can keep under pressure. Practice slowing your breath when the feed screams. Decide in advance which parts of you are non-negotiable and which parts can bend without breaking. Then ask yourself one quiet question as you end this chapter: when the next wave hits, and it will, what single action would make you the calmest person in the room? If you can name it now, you will find it later, and when others break, you will be crowned by nothing more dramatic than composure. Loyalty is a mirage. Loyalty is real, until incentives change. We don't like that sentence, but you can feel its truth in your bones. People promise forever and mean it in the moment, then life moves the price tags and those promises begin to wobble. Machiavelli never mocked loyalty, he just refused to worship it. He studied what sits underneath it: transactions, emotions, identity, risk. When those shift, loyalty shifts. That doesn't make people monsters. It makes them human. And if you understand this, you stop taking betrayal so personally and start designing around it like a builder who expects rain. Most loyalty has a transactional core. We stay because staying pays in some currency: money, status, safety, meaning, belonging. Sometimes the exchange is clean and conscious, sometimes it's tangled with memory and hope. The mistake is to assume that a warm feeling today will override a cold calculation tomorrow. Trust is useful, until it isn't. This is why verification is love for the future, not suspicion of the present. You verify roles, access, and expectations not because you doubt a friend but because you respect a changing world. What you lock in writing, what you audit on schedule, what you measure in daylight, these are the structures that keep affection from having to carry the entire weight of reality. Turning loyalty into leverage is not cruelty, it is craft. Keep ledgers of favors and promises, not to punish, but to remember. Gratitude fades quickly in loud lives. A recorded debt is a quiet string you can pull when you need momentum. Sunk cost matters too. When people invest time, skill, and reputation in your mission, they defend that investment by staying. Identity is the deepest hook of all. When someone can say, "People like us do things like this," they aren't merely loyal to you, they are loyal to a self they want to keep seeing in the mirror. Align roles with identity, reward visible contribution, and loyalty starts to feel less like a mood and more like muscle memory. Reading false allies is a discipline of timing more than words. Listen for the lag between what someone says and when they act. Watch who shows up on ordinary days, not just at ceremonies. Pay attention to the favors they choose, the ones that cost them something small but real: effort, access, a slice of political risk. Beware the person who overpraises in public and undercommits in private. Beware the ally who loves your vision but never adjusts their calendar. Beware the partner who agrees to outcomes while resisting metrics. Mismatches are maps. They tell you where promises will snap under pressure. Some alliances are built on fear, and while that sounds harsh, there is a mercy in predictability. Consequences create clarity. When people know the line and the cost of crossing it, they can measure their choices. Fear without fairness rots a culture. But consequence with consistency keeps your word from being treated like weather. Machiavelli would tell you to be slow to threaten and quick to follow through, to avoid rage and prefer routine, to make punishment private and proportionate, and to make rewards public and precise. Over time, the room learns the rhythm, and loyalty grows out of reliable cause and effect. You can see these patterns everywhere. Corporations switch suppliers after years of partnership because the incentives moved, costs changed, leadership changed, regulations changed. Political coalitions fracture and reassemble not because everyone suddenly forgot their ideals, but because boundaries, poles, and power centers shifted. In our personal lives, the friend who felt like family can drift the moment a new job, a new love, or a new crisis rearranges their priorities. None of this cancels what was good. It simply reminds us that loyalty breathes. It expands and contracts with context. So what do you do with this knowledge without becoming cold? You design for the person you love today and the stranger they could become tomorrow. You give clearly, you ask clearly, you document clearly. You choose teams where shared incentives are baked into the work, not taped to the wall as a slogan. You seed identity by telling real stories about what you stand for, and you repeat those stories until they are bigger than any one personality. And quietly, you build a life that does not collapse if one bond loosens, because resilience is the only loyalty you can guarantee. As you close this chapter, hold one gentle question: whose loyalty are you assuming instead of maintaining? If the answer startles you, let it teach you. Strengthen the structures, refresh the promises, verify the roles, and be brave enough to accept the relationships that have finished their work. In a world that always reprices our choices, you don't need forever to be safe. You need clarity, alignment, and the courage to adjust when the weather turns. The art of silent influence. Silence is not absence, it's pressure. It bends the air, changes the pace, and makes people fill the space with their own thoughts, their own confessions, their own need to be understood. Most of us treat silence like a glitch to fix, but the strategist treats it like oxygen control. You don't have to dominate a room to lead it. You can guide it by managing breath, tempo, and attention. When you speak less, others listen more carefully to what remains. When you hold still, the frantic energy around you has a place to settle. Presence begins as a physical fact: the way you take your seat, the way your shoulders lower half an inch, the way your eyes meet someone's and stay there just long enough to say, "I'm here, and I'm not rushing." That small act changes the atmosphere. People inhale deeper. They slow down without knowing why. Influence begins before language. Nonverbal control is a craft of cadence, stillness, and eye work. Cadence is the rhythm of your words and the spaces between them. You can lift a room by leaning into vowels and easing through endings, or you can soften it by landing sentences like a quiet period rather than an exclamation point. Stillness is selective motion. You let your face carry meaning, your hands rest, your body avoid the nervous choreography that reveals doubt. Eye work is not a stare, it's a steady relay of attention, one person at a time, long enough to register dignity but short enough to keep the circle included. If you master these three, you can say very little and still be the axis people rotate around. They will aim their sentences toward you as if you were gravity. The subtle advantage comes from letting others arrive at what you already know. You could tell them directly, but direct truths run into direct resistance. When people discover an idea in their own words, they defend it with a passion they would never offer your instruction. The art is to plant a seed without taking credit for the tree. You place a detail that bothers them just enough to investigate. You ask a question with an answer shaped like their own values. You frame a puzzle and then step back. The brain hates unfinished patterns, it reaches forward to complete them. When it does, it feels ownership. And ownership is obedience dressed in pride. Making it theirs is a three-step dance: planting, pausing, pulling back. Planting is the careful insertion of a premise, a number that doesn't fit, a contrast that feels unfair, a goal that feels slightly out of reach. Pausing is where silence becomes pressure and pressure becomes motion. You refuse to rescue the moment too quickly, you let it sting a little. In that sting, people move. Pulling back is where you remove your fingerprints. You praise the insight, not yourself. You keep your face neutral so credit sticks to the speaker. You ask, "How would you run with that?" and then you nod while they assign themselves the work. The manipulation here isn't cruel, it's efficient. You're aligning outcomes with identity so that effort feels like self-expression, not compliance. The illusion of autonomy is not an illusion when you use it cleanly. Freedom frames obedience because the human mind bends toward choices it believes it authored. Offer two paths that honor the goal, and most will choose one with relief. Write the first sentence of a plan and ask them to write the second. Offer boundaries that protect their time and your standards, and watch how quickly resentment dissolves when the cage looks like a guardrail. People do not resist being led, they resist feeling erased. When you give them authorship of the journey, the destination stops feeling like your demand and starts feeling like their design. In your own life, practice this softly. Lower the volume of your voice and see if the room leans in. Replace a speech with a question. Trade speed for weight. When you feel the itch to prove your point, try planting it and letting silence carry it across. Notice how often others solve problems they used to hand back to you. Notice how much energy returns when you no longer wrestle every sentence to the ground. Silent influence is not passivity, it's precision. It asks you to trust timing, to respect other people's need to own their choices, and to build spaces where good ideas are easy to think. As you close your eyes tonight, consider one conversation you keep losing. What would happen if you said half as much, breathed twice as slowly, and let the pause do the heavy lifting? In a loud world, quiet is not retreat. It is design. And the room will feel the shape you make. Exploit human weakness. Empathy can be a map and a weapon. The moment you understand what moves someone, you gain the power to steer them, and the responsibility to decide where you're taking them. Machiavelli would not ask you to be cruel. He would ask you to be honest about what people are: brilliant, frightened, hungry for meaning, and wired with old levers that still move us in modern rooms. If you can read those levers, you can change outcomes. If you can't, you will keep losing to those who can. There are 7 doors most people walk through without noticing: fear, greed, ego, status hunger, belonging, certainty, and novelty. Fear asks, will I be safe? Greed asks, what's in it for me? Ego whispers, please, let me feel special. Status hunger stretches for the step that lifts us above our peers, even by an inch. Belonging longs to hear, you're with us. Certainty reaches for a script so the unknown won't swallow us, and novelty chases the spark that makes a dull hour glow. None of these are bad by themselves. They are part of being human. But in the hands of a strategist, they become tools, handles you can grip to turn a heavy door with a single wrist. Tool use is the craft of pairing incentives to the person in front of you. If fear rules the room, offer shelter before you offer ideas, reduce risk, increase clarity, remove hidden costs. If greed is the quiet engine, show the upside with math and timing, not noise. If ego is tender, praise the right thing, effort, skill, or courage, and make the next step feel like a stage built just for them. When status hunger hums, design visible wins that signal progress without breeding resentment. For belonging, use language that says we with integrity, and give small roles that matter so identity can anchor behavior. For certainty, write the sequence: first we do this, then we do that, here's the checkpoint where we recalibrate. And when novelty is starving, add one unexpected angle, an image, a challenge, a reward, so attention returns to the table and stays. None of this requires lies. It requires attention, patience, and the ability to sit with someone long enough to hear which door they're already leaning on. Machiavellian empathy is reading to steer, not to soothe. You watch the micro-flinch when a deadline moves. You notice the breath deepen when recognition appears. You test with small offers and learn from the way their eyes brighten or cloud. It is not therapy, it is navigation. You don't need every detail of a person's story. You need the pattern of their choices under pressure. Then you place the right weight on the right lever and the decision turns, gently, almost willingly. People will call you persuasive. What you really are is accurate. But accuracy without humanity curdles into something ugly. Predator-prey dynamics are real in nature and sometimes in business, yet we are not meant to treat each other like animals to be cornered. The mind that dehumanizes will, sooner or later, dehumanize itself. You can stay realistic without becoming cold by remembering the simple rule: protect dignity while you guide behavior. Give exits. Offer informed consent when stakes are high. Refuse humiliation as a tool, because humiliation poisons the well you drink from tomorrow. If power means bending outcomes, let it also mean bending yourself toward restraint when the easy win would cost someone's face. An ethical boundary is not a slogan, it's a line you can describe before the temptation arrives. Decide what you will not say even if it would close the deal. Decide which vulnerability you will never touch, perhaps fear, when the person is already drowning, or belonging, when isolation has made them fragile. Decide how you will repair things if your nudge goes farther than you intended. Real power can apologize without losing its spine, because its identity does not depend on always being right. The responsibility is simple: use empathy to build structures where people make better choices, even when those choices serve your goals, so they wake up the next day with more self-respect, not less. So pause for a moment and look at your own levers. Which door do you walk through most? Fear, greed, ego, status, belonging, certainty, or novelty? Name it without shame. When you know your handle, you are harder to move by accident and easier to move on purpose. Then look at the people you lead, love, or negotiate with. What single adjustment, one offer, one phrase, one boundary, would help them act from their strongest self instead of their weakest reflex? If empathy is a map, decide to use it like a compass, not a trap. Steer with care. Win with clarity. And leave everyone involved a little more human than you found them. The 21 Machiavellian Rules of Power. Power doesn't always announce itself. Most days it edits the moment and lets the moment speak. The paradox is simple and uncomfortable: the kinder story wins hearts, but the cleaner structure wins history. Tonight we don't worship darkness, we study design. 21 small hinges that swing heavy doors. Listen for the ticking under each law, the quiet metronome that keeps strategy honest, and take what sharpens you. First, conceal your intentions: clarity for you, fog for them. Imagine a founder who talks loudly about a flashy partnership while quietly negotiating supply at a price no rival can touch. Reporters chase the decoy, the real move closes in silence. Application: set one true goal you never place on agendas, and plant a harmless decoy to satisfy curiosity while you work. Second, control information flow: he who filters, governs. Picture the teammate who always sends the crisp recap after meetings. Over time, their summary becomes the unofficial record, and the record becomes the plan. Application: become the brief, write the one page that others forward, and you will steer decisions without raising your voice. Third, master emotional detachment: feel, but don't flinch. A heated negotiation throws accusations like sparks. One person pauses 5 seconds, asks for specifics, and answers the question behind the insult. The room follows their temperature. Application: the pause rule: delay your first reply just long enough to replace reflex with choice, then speak to outcomes, not egos. Fourth, always have a scapegoat: protect the crown. A campaign misses a deadline, but the pre-named process checkpoint absorbs blame. We halt at gate 3 when data is incomplete. No one sacrifices a person, the system takes the fall and the leader remains credible. Application: create a failure sink in advance, a policy, a stage gate, an external constraint, to catch impact when plans slip. Fifth, exploit morality as a weapon: standards slice. A rival wants a shortcut, you frame refusal as duty to the customer and the craft. Now it's not your preference versus theirs, it's integrity versus convenience, and the crowd nods. Application: Tie your ask to a shared value in a sentence ordinary people can defend at dinner. 6th, never outshine the master. Egos decide promotions. A brilliant analyst presents an insight, then credits the department head for shaping the environment that made it possible. The boss feels taller, the analyst becomes indispensable. Application, reflect glory upward before you add your light, preempt envy with gratitude that costs nothing. 7th, turn enemies into pawns, friction is fuel. Two firms who dislike each other agree to a tiny, time-boxed data exchange that drains both of resources while you learn how they operate. You don't befriend them, you corral them. Application, design narrow collaborations with defined exits and small scopes, enough to pull attention, not enough to empower. 8th, appear generous, stay calculating, warm hands, cold math. You donate tools to the community, free tiers, helpful templates, open docs, and keep the premium levers behind a calm paywall. The world praises your kindness while your margins remain intact. Application, give in public where it builds narrative equity, but track your private ledgers so kindness compounds instead of depletes. 9th, manipulate through gratitude, debts bind. On day 1, you help the new hire fix a mess that isn't your job. 30 days later, you ask for a small favor that advances a shared target. They remember who steadied them. Application, make a specific, well-timed intervention that is easy to recall and easy to repay, then wait for the moment when reciprocity is natural. 10th, use absence to increase value, space sharpens desire. A consultant becomes unavailable for 2 weeks every quarter. Calendars adjust, clients prepare better, and the consultant's presence feels like an event rather than a faucet. Application, schedule blackout windows and protect them, scarcity teaches respect faster than speeches. 11th, attack minds, not bodies, beliefs build prisons. Two sides argue about budget size, you rename the problem as, how do we buy certainty? Suddenly it's not money versus money, it's risk versus risk, and the terms tilt toward you. Application, reframe the fight with a title that makes your solution the reasonable default. 12th, control desire and fear, throttle both. A manager alternates warmth with measured withholding, praise when standards are met, quiet when they aren't, clarity always. The team learns that reward and uncertainty arrive in rhythm, and attention stays high. Application, build an alternating pattern, approval and challenge, so complacency never gets time to nest. 13th, feed the illusion of choice, 2 doors, 1 hallway. A parent offers a teenager 2 curfews, both earlier than chaos and later than resentment. The teen chooses and cooperates, the hallway is safety. Application, present bounded options that all serve the mission, then let others select so they feel authorship, not control. 14th, never commit fully, optionality is oxygen. In a foggy market, you sign reversible contracts and pilot agreements with review clauses. When the weather changes, you pivot without reputational injury. Application, insist on clear off-ramps and checkpoints so you can adjust without apology when reality updates its terms. 15th, win wars before they start, logistics are destiny. A small studio launches on time because storage, vendors, and backups were secured months earlier. A louder rival drowns in last-minute fires. The public calls it talent, under the floorboards it was supply. Application, preposition people and resources so execution feels like sliding downhill. 16th, speak less than necessary, silence edits powerfully. In a round table, everyone rushes to prove they belong. You let the noise crest, then summarize the group's best line and suggest the next step. The decision adopts your sentence because it's the only one that sounds finished. Application, answer last, and when you do, compress the meeting into one clear path. 17th, reward publicly, punish privately, signals rule crowds. A leader thanks a junior in front of the whole team, naming the exact behavior to copy. Later, when a boundary is crossed, they close a door and handle it in quiet, measured language. Culture learns what earns applause and what earns correction without theater. Application: stage praise with names and details, keep discipline discreet and proportionate. 18th, play stupid when needed, underestimation is armor. In a vendor demo you ask the beginner question that reveals the missing feature no one dared to mention. They relax, they explain, you learn more in 2 minutes than an hour of posturing could buy. Application: selective ignorance, use show me like I'm new to disarm performance and extract truth. 19th, always have an exit strategy, survival is strategy. A partnership sours, but your contract includes a humane unwind clause and a shared PR line. You walk away intact while they flail publicly. Application: define walkaway metrics and communication scripts before you ink the deal, then follow them without drama. 20th, turn betrayal into opportunity, breaks reveal seams. A colleague leaks your plan, in the wreckage you map the path the leak took and discover a fragile process you should have fixed months ago. You close the gap and gain resilience you wouldn't have built without the wound. Application: pause the anger long enough to harvest information, what failed, who touched it, where to reinforce, then cut ties cleanly. 21st, rewrite the narrative, he who edits, rules. After a choppy launch, you publish a sober postmortem that names lessons, sets dates, and gives credit away. Critics quiet. Supporters share. The story becomes maturity, not mess. Application: publish the frame first, clear, specific, and quotable, so the laziest summary available is yours. You can hear the motif by now, the gentle tick behind every move, reduce noise, raise clarity, place the beam before the storm. None of these laws require cruelty. They require attention to incentives, to rhythm, to how minds move when stakes are real. The common thread is authorship. When you write the openings, others read you on your terms. When you offer handrails at the right height, people climb toward your outcomes willingly. When you refuse to be rushed by panic or flattered by applause, you become difficult to move without consent. Let's make this practical without breaking the spell of quiet. Choose one law and live with it for 7 days like a pocket stone. Conceal your intentions might mean keeping one goal off your public to-do list and tracking progress in a private doc. Control information flow might mean sending the next meeting's agenda today, and the recap 12 minutes after it ends. Master emotional detachment might mean practicing the 5-second pause before every reply that makes your jaw tighten. You will feel the leverage almost embarrassingly fast, not because people became weaker, but because your structures became cleaner. You might worry about ethics, and you should. Here is the compass I use when I write in the dark: if a law would work even better against you, design a counter before you wield it. If a move would humiliate someone, you're taking something that cannot be given back, don't do it. If a nudge will improve the other person's life even if they never thank you, you are probably on clean ground. And if you wake up the next day proud of both the outcome and your method, keep going. Winning does not have to taste bitter. As you sit with these 21 hinges, notice which ones feel natural and which feel like language from a distant country. The natural ones are your present strengths, polish them. The foreign ones are your blind spots, study them gently. And above all, remember that power compounds in small, quiet decisions. The world will distract you with spectacle, but spectacle rarely moves the foundation. Be the person who fixes the foundation while everyone else argues about the paint. By the time the room realizes you've been designing the board, not just playing on it, the game will already tilt your way. Not with fireworks, not with feuds, but with something better, inevitability. And that is the softest victory you can ask for, the kind that leaves the door open behind you and the bridge intact for those who walk after. If this sharpened you, let it travel. But before you pass it on, answer one private question: which single rule, practiced quietly this week, would make your future self thank you out loud? Machiavelli in the age of algorithms. Kings once ruled land. Now, rulers command feeds. Power still lives where attention gathers, but the terrain has changed from fields and fortresses to timelines and dashboards. The old prince walked through a palace, the new one walks through a network. If you listen closely, you can hear the hum, millions of tiny decisions made in fractions of a second, shaping what we see, what we want, and what we think we chose on our own. Machiavelli would not be surprised. He would simply ask the only question that matters: who designs the currents that carry the crowd? Digital Machiavellianism is the art of signal shaping. It is not louder shouting, it is cleaner structure. Trend seeding begins with a small circle who understand the first hour matters more than the first 1,000 fans. You give the algorithm a stable heartbeat, consistent posting, consistent tone, consistent tags, so it recognizes you as reliable and lifts your signal above the static. You front-load clarity in your opening seconds, because machines and minds both reward certainty. You borrow the language of the moment without letting it steal your message. You do not beg for virality, you design for repeatability and let momentum come to a surface that is smooth enough to slide across. Data is power because prediction beats force. The side that knows what will likely happen can arrive with the right offer at the right time and win without a fight. You don't need every secret, you need the few that move behavior. Which headline makes them pause? Which thumbnail earns the click without promising what you cannot deliver? Which posting window places your message where it won't be buried alive? You track the answers without falling in love with the numbers, because numbers are a compass, not a king. The point is simple: you turn guesses into tests and tests into patterns, and you let patterns carry weight so your ego doesn't have to. Social engineering has a new costume, but the moves are ancient. Parasocial leverage is the feeling that you know someone you have never met. Handle it gently. Show up with a voice that is steady and a face that is human, and small tribes will begin to form. Micro-tribes are powerful because they travel like schools of fish. Each individual is small, but together they can turn an ocean. You speak to their values, not just their appetites. You let them see the work, not only the wins. You ask for small actions that reinforce identity: share this, comment that, try this practice tonight, and the repeated doing becomes a story they tell about themselves. Influence works best when it sounds like a mirror. Freedom as convenience is the velvet cage. Everything is easier now: delivery, entertainment, attention on demand, and the price is that systems choose for us when we are tired. The algorithm says, relax, I know what you like, and it is often right, and that is the danger. We mistake comfort for consent. Real freedom costs a little friction: choosing sources on purpose, closing the app while we still have a choice, letting boredom breathe long enough to remember what we wanted before the scroll told us. This is not a call to abandon the tools, it is a reminder to use them like a pilot uses instruments, not like a passenger stares at clouds. So here are the quiet moves that keep you sovereign. Audit your inputs like you would audit your diet: less sugar, more substance, fewer empty spikes of outrage dressed as news. Build your pipeline so you are not begging gatekeepers for space: your list, your site, your rhythm. Measure narrative lift, not just views: did people move, did they remember, did they act differently next week? When something works, name why and keep it. When something fails, learn fast and delete it without drama. And never let the metrics erase the reason you began. A large audience can be a small life if you forget the point. At the end of the day, algorithms are mirrors. They reflect what we feed them, and they train us to feed more of the same. If you want to become dangerous in the best sense, calm, precise, hard to replace, design your signals with care and guard your attention like a crown jewel. Ask yourself one clear question before you post, before you watch, before you join the trend: is this making me more of who I chose to be, or just more predictable to a machine? If you can answer that honestly, you won't need a throne. The feed will be your river, and you will know how to steer. The psychology of the modern prince. Unshakable inside, adaptable outside. That is the shape of a mind that survives noise without becoming noise. Power today isn't a roar, it's a center of gravity. You feel it before you see it: the quiet person who does not flinch when the room gets hot, who changes tactics without changing self, who can be soft without being weak and firm without being cruel. The modern prince lives at that intersection, certainty and purpose, flexibility and path. Mindset comes first because it sets the temperature for everything else. Certainty is not pretending you know the future, it is refusing to be negotiated out of your mission by other people's panic. You wake up already decided about the why, and you allow the how to evolve with evidence. Ruthlessness, the clean version, is simply the willingness to remove what does not serve the mission, busy work, stale alliances, the lie you tell yourself about how much more time you need. Adaptability without cruelty means you can pivot fast without breaking the people who help you pivot. You cut waste, not dignity. You hold standards the way a lighthouse holds its beam, steady, visible, never personal. Emotional control is a daily drill, not a personality trait. Anti-reactivity begins in the body, because the body reacts before the story. You learn the small rituals that reset your nervous system when heat rises: 1 slow breath in for 4, hold for 2, out for 6, a sip of water you actually taste, a sentence you repeat that pulls you back to ground, what matters here. You create a pause long enough to choose your response. In that pause, questions replace accusations, options replace ultimatums, and the moment that could have owned you becomes a moment you can steer. People will call you calm. What you really are is trained. Charisma, at this level, is psychology in motion. You mirror emotion, not opinions. Agreement isn't required to create rapport, recognition is. When someone is angry, you acknowledge the heat without swallowing it. I can hear how frustrating this is. When someone is afraid, you lend certainty before you lend advice. Here's what we'll do next. Humans bond through felt states more than shared sentences. Matching the state lets your words land. Then you guide the mood toward where the work happens, from anger to clarity, from fear to plan, from confusion to one clean choice. You don't seduce a room with tricks, you regulate a room with presence. Empathy and manipulation form a razor's edge. The duality is real, the same skill that lets you comfort can be used to coerce. The modern prince draws a line and names it aloud, if only to themselves. Use empathy to understand and to design environments where better choices are easier, not to trap people in their weakest reflex. If someone would feel ashamed to discover how you steered them, you went too far. If they would feel grateful because the nudge aligned with their deeper values, you led well. That is the test. After the result, can both of you look in the mirror without flinching? Power measured only by outcomes is blunt. Power measured by outcomes and residue, the feeling left behind, is art. Strategic detachment is your quiet insurance. Optionality in identity means you are more than one role. If a title disappears, you do not. You are the builder, not just the brand, the thinker, not just the team, the craft, not just the platform. Optionality in plan means you keep reversible steps as long as the terrain is foggy and save irreversible ones for when the horizon clears. You diversify your sources of meaning the same way you diversify income streams. That way, a single failure cannot bankrupt your sense of self. Detachment is not distance, it's freedom to act without the fear that any one outcome decides your worth. Hold this all gently and notice how it changes the way you move. You start asking better questions. What is the mission under all the noise? What would the calm version of me do next? Which emotion in this room needs recognition before any logic can land? Where is the boundary between guiding and grabbing? What backup path preserves momentum if this door closes? When you live inside these questions, you stop chasing control and start creating conditions. People breathe easier around you, and paradoxically, they follow more willingly. You become the person whose presence lowers the temperature and raises the standard. As you close this chapter, take one truth with you: strength is not stiffness. It is a spine that bends and never snaps. Choose one drill for this week, perhaps the 5-second pause before any heated reply, or the single sentence that recenters you, or the habit of mirroring emotion before offering direction. Practice it until it feels like muscle memory. The world will keep changing costumes, markets, headlines, moods, but your core can stay the same: unshakable inside, adaptable outside. And when the room starts to sway, you will not need to shout. You will simply stand, and the floor will remember how to be still. Outwitting everyone, the final game. The most elegant power is quiet. It doesn't need a stage or a storm. It rearranges the room the way gravity rearranges water, without noise, without drama, with a certainty that feels like nature itself. If you've walked with me this far, you already know the tools. Now we turn to the question that matters: how to use them without losing yourself. Mission-aligned Machiavellianism is the discipline of aiming every tactic at a purpose larger than your ego. You remove what doesn't serve, you choose leverage over spectacle, you set the game before it starts, but you do it in service of a life you wouldn't be ashamed to win. Your moves sharpen, your timing cleans up, your results improve, and still, you keep a small space inside you that no victory can buy and no defeat can sell. That is where your mission lives, and that is where your power draws its quiet light. The ethics of dark psychology begin with harm avoidance and the principle of force last. Force is the lazy twin of influence, it works quickly and leaves bruises that make future work harder. Persuasion, structure, and incentives build wells people return to, force builds a desert. So you ask, before every hard move, can clarity, pacing, or incentives achieve the same end? If not, can the pressure be proportionate and private, with exits intact and dignity preserved? The answer won't always be clean, because life isn't clean, but asking the question keeps your hands from hardening. When you err, you repair. When you win, you resist gloating. When you must be sharp, you never confuse cruelty with strength. If power is the ability to bend outcomes, morality is the promise to leave the people and the place better than you found them, stronger, not softer, awake, not afraid. Prediction, not posture, decides winners over time. You don't read minds, you read base rates, incentives, and context. Base rates say what usually happens in this situation, to people like this, under pressures like these. Incentives show you where attention will flow when masks come off. Context filters character. The same person can look noble in one frame and small in another, simply because the costs changed. When in doubt, trust the map more than the speech. In practice, this means you stop arguing with human nature and start designing around it. You expect fear at deadlines, status tug-of-war in teams, loss aversion in negotiations. You make the right choice easier and the wrong choice heavier, and you stop taking predictably human behavior as a personal betrayal. Strategy is compassion that learned math. Reputation is a rumor, robustness is a foundation. The long game favors those who build for stress, not applause. If your system only works when everyone loves you, you don't have a system, you have a performance. Build redundancies in relationships, cash flow, skills, and meaning. Keep optionality in your identity so the loss of a title doesn't feel like the loss of yourself. Hold enough cash, literal or emotional, to afford slow thinking when panic tries to rent your mouth. Choose commitments that compound, not fireworks that leave smoke. This is how you become hard to cancel, hard to corner, hard to break, not by winning every headline, but by remaining useful after the headline fades. So here is the final revelation, spoken softly because truth doesn't need to raise its voice. If Machiavelli lived today, he'd rule silently. He would not chase fame or outrage, he would design conditions, align incentives, write first drafts of the story other people repeat, and walk away before the crowd realized it was following. You can do a gentler version of the same. You can choose a mission that makes your strength a public good. You can keep your standards high, your heart steady, your exits ready, and your hands clean. And you can measure your success not only by what you got, but by the residue you left behind, rooms that think more clearly, people who respect themselves more, systems that keep working when you're not there. As this journey closes, ask yourself 3 quiet questions. What will I refuse, even if it would make me faster? What structures can I build this month that will still serve me when the weather turns? Whose life gets easier because I decided to become precise instead of loud? Let the answers be small and real. One boundary you keep. One habit you practice until it's boring. One move you make that only your future self will notice. Outwitting everyone is not a contest against the world. It is a promise to your better self, to think one layer deeper, to act one breath slower, to choose the kind of power that does not need to be seen to be felt. When you can do that, you won't need a throne. The game will tilt, softly, in your direction, and you will have the grace to pretend it was always this way. If this helped you see with a steadier eye, subscribe to Audiobook Vision, tap like so it reaches the people who need it, and share it with the one person ready to wake up. Drop a comment with the moment that shifted something for you. Then close the app, breathe, and walk slowly. The world will still be here when you return, and you'll meet it on your terms.